Hey, thanks for making it to Veterans Daily with Jay and Clay. We are glad you made it. Look, there is so much news and stuff going out there that we are missing the very basics, the very basics of what it takes to get your claims approved through the VA. Nothing has changed today. It's the same as it was not too long ago. Granted, there's rating schedule changes coming, and it might be for the worse. So you should absolutely put in an intent to file and think about some of these very basics in order to ensure that you not only submit your claim that can get approved for service connection, but also getting that correct evaluation for your rating percentage. There's nothing worse than getting rated and having it be a 0. Great, I'm service connected. Oh, it's a 0 or a 10 when it should be higher. These are the types of things that we're going to be covering today because Clay stayed up all night long thinking about what is important for you to know. With that, hit the thumbs up, subscribe, share with a friend, all that good stuff. We really appreciate it. Every thumbs up and every minute watched really does help to spread the reach. And really, that's what we're trying to do. And look, I'm going to encourage you. Sorry, I'm talking so long, Clay, but I want to encourage everybody out there to just take a knee for a minute. And even if you don't think that this applies directly to you, look, there's nothing else I could file or I'm good where I'm at. There's two things. One, you might get enlightened on something, which is good. And two, you're going to get a refresher. You might already know a lot of this stuff, but you're going to get a refresher. And that information could be relayed to your buddy who served in whatever or who served wherever. And you can have that conversation in a new, lightened, refreshed way. With that, I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Clay. Clay, give us the rundown on your list here of what we're going to go through for the folks today.
So the glorious, magnificent topics are really taking a different angle. Usually when we talk about claims, it's, submitting that very first claim for those new veterans, or you've been out for 20 years, but you haven't submitted a claim yet. And we talk about evidence from service and all these other aspects. The different angle today is, okay, well, what about those veterans who are at 70, 80, really at 90% and 90s? There's a good 90, like 90 to 94. Then there's that bad 90, 85 to 89. And that's a huge chunk to get through to reach 100%. And most veterans do that by understanding how to do some sort of self-assessment or evaluate yourself. For secondary conditions, we're going to talk about what it literally looks like to understand your body and your health from head to toe from a veteran's perspective. And then the importance of evidence from service, because secondary connections, there's easy, medium, and hard, and that's how we're going to break those up. But generally speaking, all secondaries are more difficult than direct service claims. So if you have an option for direct, that's going to be the way for service connection. So with that, Jason, I'm going to turn it over to you for secondary claims. And let's start with easy claims. Easy secondary claims, what comes first to my mind is like medication-based secondary claims. And I'd like to put you on the spot and just talk about those easy secondary claims from your perspective here.
Right. And I'm going to start with this. The evidence that's needed for a secondary claim is a little bit different than what's needed for a primary condition claim. Now, when you look at a secondary claim, you still need a nexus, a link. But it's not a nexus back to your time in service. It's a nexus. It's a link to a service-connected condition. So in other words, I have a service-connected condition. That condition has now, in some way, caused this other condition. You need to prove that medically. You can't just say it happened and this is why. You have to go get some medical evidence to help support that claim. Nexus letters are essential, and they can absolutely be utilized here. If your doctor can't or won't, utilize AME, free consultation. Reach out to them and have that discussion. Information's free. Take advantage. So nexus letters are important to build on this. Now, an easy claim with a secondary in my opinion, probably one of the easiest. We have a lot of people with back issues
Yeah, for sure.
that then create the numbness and tingling going down the legs, right? So like that radiculopathy. So that is a very, very common secondary condition that if you articulate it appropriately in your CMP exam, it might just get added on through the claims process. Don't rely on it. I mean, don't ever rely on the VA to get it 100% right all the time. But in a lot of cases, that can happen where you get rated for your radiculopathy, that numbness and tingling down the extremities by evidence that's gathered in the CMP exam because the CMP examiner is checking for that type of stuff. So that would be a very easy secondary to me. In fact, because it's so well documented, there's not even typically a nexus letter because it's so medically it's just such vast knowledge that creates that it's not uncommon to see it get approved without a hardcore nexus letter stating that this has absolutely caused that. Now if you got denied for some reason, weirder things have happened, then you could turn around and file a supplemental to that with your additional evidence holding that secondary condition with a nexus letter. And that would be one that pops in the top of my head or right off the top of my head. Clay, what about you? You give me an easy one.
Yeah, there's a lens I would use to like determine easy, medium, and hard, and you definitely hit on it. It's, does medical evidence show the causation? And with things like sciatic nerve damage from your lower spine, that's gonna be seen. You can see on an MRI that condition is pinching your sciatic nerve. Now, there are different types of sciatic nerve damage, radiculopathy, there's paralysis, depending on what you have going on. Radiculopathy is the most common, but I'm going to double down on the nerve thing as well, because in your neck, you can have nerve damage to your arms. You can have a shoulder condition, like a surgery, that could cause nerve damage down your arm. An elbow condition, nerve damage down your arm. A wrist condition can cause carpal tunnel. So wherever bones and veins meet, you would have that easy secondary service connection, because you don't have to correlate that, hey, this might, at least as likely as not stems from this. You can see it via medical evidence. And that's what makes it easy. Now, the other side of easy, and this is not what we're saying, is not doctrine. When we say easy, it's just how we're presenting the information. Another easy secondary claim is anything that's medication based. Okay. Most people know for males, mental health medication causes erectile dysfunction. That's going to be SMCK. So your ED claim will come back at 0%. Boom. That's how most are connected. But there's two other types of medications. One we've talked about a lot, Jason. It's kind of like that hidden medication, which is hypertension. If you are hypertensive, you are on medication. There's no other. You're not going to get away from medication if you're hypertensive. In a lot of those, I would probably say the most common is a diuretic, because it flushes your system out. Okay, so you're using the restroom a lot, so that 0% hypertension rating can turn into a urinary frequency rating at 20%, and there's other urinary ratings as well. If you're using the restroom, I believe the CFR says 5 times per night. That is a 40% rating on an easy claim. And one thing I want to make very clear here, because sometimes people hear medication and they just go full on and submit the claim. If you're taking medication, it has to be prescribed and treated for that condition that's service connected.
Right.
So if you have high blood pressure, but it's not service connected, and you're taking medication, even if the VA prescribes it because you're above 50% and it's free, or you're just paying out of pocket. If you submit that claim and hypertension is not service connected, that means nothing, and that claim will be denied. you likely wouldn't even be awarded a C&P exam if that was
Right.
the basis of your claim. Now,
Yep.
I do want to bring up another connection that I put in the easy category because it is medication. However, it could very well be a hard secondary too. And that is anything that deals with NSAIDs, 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 if you will, or anti-inflammatory medication. If you're taking it short term, not a big deal. Most providers want to get you off NSAIDs or anti-inflammatory medication. But if you're taking that for like an extended period of time, like 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, there are known, not guessing, there are known side effects. One of those is GERD, other gastroesophagus conditions. A lot of gut-related issues come from NSAIDs. And so, yes, it is a easy secondary. However, whatever is causing you to be on NSAIDs to begin with has to be pretty severe, especially if you're taking a long course of medication for that. Jason, do you want to throw anything on NSAIDs or GERD? I know that's something that you deal with quite often.
Right. Well, the only thing I'm going to say on the GERD thing is the VA changed the rating schedule. So this is just kind of I guess a cautionary tale, right? So the VA changed the GERD rating schedule, well, the rating schedule for gastrointestinal issues, and changed it from a more liberal rating scale to a very stringent, strict schedule, if you will. And they're now rating GERD as esophageal stricter, and really it's just focusing on two things: difficulty swallowing and the tightening of the esophagus. And that's all they're rating it on now. And the reason why I bring that up is because as you look forward, we got rating schedule changes coming. This is not a big surprise. It happens. They're changing them all. This will happen. Most recent information is what, August, Clay, is the effective final date for neurological, respiratory, auditory, and mental health. 4 rating schedule changes coming. How can you take advantage of the schedules today if you don't have all your stuff together? File an intent to file, preserve today's date. All right. I do have another easy secondary that's I think often overlooked in a quick, I guess, kind of example as well. Any joint type injuries will often develop arthritis in there from the damage. And this is just, again, when we're talking about easy, medium, hard, it's easy to understand the causation and the correlate, like all of it. Like that makes sense. Medically, it's so medically obvious that even people who aren't medical professionals go, that makes sense. And then as we get to the hard, it's like, how does that? How can you get that from that? That's the hard ones, right? So the tale here is, look, the VA segregates out a lot of different conditions, and it can end up being multiple ratings. This is a very important aspect. That's why we have to look at secondaries. Veteran A, and I've done this with you before, Clay, Veteran A goes, man, I got a back problem. Oh, my back hurts so bad. It's really jacked up. Man, it's so bad. Man, I got tingling in my legs. I got arthritis in there, I bet. And man, I'm just depressed about it because I can't do things like I used to. Went in and filed a back claim, and my back claim came back at 10%. Woohoo! Or 20, maybe. And now you're bitter and you're irritated because you're like, wow, 10 or 20%, and it's this debilitating for me. I can't believe it. And you move on and you hate the VA and all that stuff, and that's it. Veteran B listened to this video and went, okay, I'm filing for my back condition, my injury or whatever in my lower back. I'm also filing for whatever it is, radiculopathy down my left extremity, radiculopathy down my right. also filing for arthritis. And oh, by the way, I'm also going to file for depression due to my back pain, right? So whose claim's going to be higher? Who's going to have a higher rating? And then those two veterans meet somewhere and have a conversation. Yeah, I filed for my back. Oh, I got that same back issue. I got my combined rating 70%. Well, mine's 10. Well, it's because you missed out on all these secondaries. Secondaries are important. You're not taking advantage of the system. It's just the nature of medical conditions. It's dominoes a lot of times. And sometimes they fall slower than others. Sometimes the secondary isn't at the same exact moment that the primary occurred. Sometimes it's the primary, and then a few years goes by, and now you start to develop this. And then a few more years go by, and you start to develop that. But it all originated from that single primary condition. Back to you, Clay.
Yeah, I want to go into medium level secondaries, and this is when if I'm submitting a claim as a veteran, maybe I've been denied once or twice, maybe not. This is what tips the scale of saying, you know what, maybe I'm going to consider a nexus letter, right? Again, AME information is going to be down below in the description, but it's those medium and especially the hard ones that are really for me, like my personal decision-making process. That's what's going to tip the scale to say, okay, now it's worth it. So starting with probably the most common secondary in the medium category would be mental health secondary to chronic pain. Mental health is usually connected direct, especially in that GWAT generation and just American culture in general. 10 years ago, which seems like forever, mental health was not talked about at all. Think about 20, 30, 40 years ago, the Vietnam era, I don't think the words mental health existed, to be honest with you.
No,
and then today, there's definitely a cultural shift that it's okay to not be okay, which is a fact, by the way. But so there's a lot of medical evidence that gears towards mental health direct, but some veterans have a back rating their lower spine at 40%, which is a severe back rating in case people are not tracking that. 10%, you're fine. Like I have a 10% rating for my back. I can pick up my girls and do all that stuff. Maybe in 20 years that'll change. Hopefully not, but it's definitely not a 40% rating. So let's say you have 40% rating for your back. You've had both knee surgeries. Maybe you have some neck pain in there, all service connected. Your ability to, my daughter has swim lessons tonight. Let's say I had tons of musculoskeletal conditions and I could not participate in my daughter's like development life. That's going to cause something inside of me, even like disdain or like discontent. In the Marine Corps, we say a lot of like hate and discontent. That's going to cause a lot of hate and discontent I have in myself. Maybe my military service, that's going to evolve into maybe depression. Probably some very deep depressive issues right there. And so mental health secondary to chronic pain is a very common rating that's connected. And I see this both with and without a nexus letter. The only time I see it connected without a nexus letter is when the veteran is very active in current medical evidence. Hey, doc, my back is ruining my life. Hey, doc, my back and my knees are ruining my life. And if you have those constant reports, you have a diagnosis of major depressive disorder, your chronic pain is mentioned constantly throughout your records, you have the evidence right there to submit the claim. However, I'm willing to bet my life that most veterans don't fall into that category. And so that's another thing that would like tip the scale onto the nexus letter, at least for my decision matrix up here. Mental health and chronic pain to me is worth it because mental health ratings are at 10, 30, 50, 70, and 100. I don't really see 30% ratings outside of like direct insomnia. I've seen a few, The most common rating is absolutely 50% for mental health by far. 70% is not, it's not uncommon, but certainly not common. And then 100% for mental health, it's just super uncommon. Okay. That might change in the future. I don't think so, actually. Jason's of the opposite opinion. But yes, as far as medium level secondary claims, mental health is definitely one of those. There are a few more, Jason. What do you have?
Yeah. You know, I'm gonna chime this in here real quick, and then I'll jump into it. Remember that secondary conditions require evidence.
Yeah.
Okay. Just because you already got your foot in with the VA doesn't mean log in online and start saying all these different things that you think you have from self-diagnosing and submitting a claim, because they're all just going to get rejected. You need to go get diagnosed for the condition in which you are claiming, even if it's a secondary condition. So you need to do that. You need to prove that link between your existing condition and that claimable condition that you're filing for. So, you know, my back problem is now causing my mental health problem. You can't just say I have a mental health issue. You have to go get diagnosed for something. You need to go see somebody who says, yes, you do, is number one. Number two, you need to somehow prove that the two are related, that this is causing this. And if it's strewn throughout your paperwork, right, on both sides, if it's on my bad back side and it's on my mental health side, you know, really, you know, it's just, man, I can't do all these things that I used to do, and my back's been giving me problems, and it's just, I'm just so depressed and angry and mad and all these different things. Then it could be clear, and you could probably go without having that nexus letter. And in other cases, you might need to get the nexus letter to really tie it together. The harder that becomes, as far as the scale that we're talking about is concerned, the more likely you're going to need more evidence to really support your claim. The easy ones, right? Radiculopathy from your back or arthritis from your back, it's like, oh, that's kind of a no-brainer. But when you get into these medium and hards, you might need more medical evidence. Now, I would say another one that's kind of in the medium range would be when other musculoskeletal issues arise from a service-connected musculoskeletal issue. So in other words, I have a bad left knee and left ankle. So I tend to favor more on my right. And over time, I'm using my right more and more, and it starts to wear and tear more. And now I start to develop problems on my right. Now those become secondary conditions to the problems I had on my left. So same thing with it moving up into your back. Maybe you don't have a back condition today, but you have an ankle condition or a knee condition. And so you're walking a little bit funny. And over time, that tweaks out your spine and things start to develop up there. You could kind of, you know, the ankle bone's connected to the knee bone's connected to the hip bone, you know, and go on and on. So there could be some of that. Same thing with the idea of bad back, bad knees. You see folks sitting in a chair and you go to get up and you grab the handles of the chair and you push yourself up to get out. Eventually your elbows and your shoulders are going to develop issues from getting up out of chairs and stuff like that. Those can become secondary conditions, but you need to draw that connection and you need to be diagnosed for that secondary condition. Clay.
Yeah, that's a great point. And looking at musculoskeletal, personally, if there was like a category between medium and hard, is probably where I'd put those. And it depends what you're talking about.
Right.
There's three different avenues there. There's the bilateral ones, which you had mentioned, right? My left knee hurts. I'm overcompensating on my left knee. That's one avenue. Another avenue is I have flat feet. Now it's affecting my ankles or my knees or my back, so it's ground up. Those would definitely be in that medium category. I think it would become hard if it's the opposite, where it's up, down. So I have a bad back. It's causing my knees
Yes. Agreed.
I think that's where I'm no physician, but just looking at VA claims in general.
But
I've
you look
only
like one.
Yeah. If the physicians look like this, then they're freaking cool, okay? But um, I've only seen one veterans claim that was service connected, knee conditions secondary to back. I generally see ground up, especially like
Yeah.
severe flat. If you have 50% for flat feet suck. Okay, like I'm talking like pronated flat feet. Your feet are truly flat. You're gonna have huge, like monstrous foot pain. You're gonna have ankle issues. You're gonna have knee issues, and that's pretty common. Another kind of medium claim, secondary, would be, I don't know if it would be, so musculoskeletal would be like the in between of medium and hard. I would say cervical neck pain. I'm sorry, migraine secondary to neck pain, depending on what that is, would probably be like the easy to medium, in between there.
Right.
It's a super common claim that I would argue requires a nexus letter. I shouldn't use the word require because it's that lens, right? You can't,
Right.
there's no x-ray that's going to show you, hey, that lower back condition is causing mental health. You can't prove it. There is zero proof. It's just indicators. And then you have enough indicators that correlate to at least as likely as not. That's the difference between causation. My lower spine is pinching my sciatic nerve. I can see it. That's causation. To my lower back is causing depression. It's like, okay, well, how do you prove it? And that is where evidence becomes critical, whether that's from your private insurance, the VA, or you essentially pay for that CMP exam. There's many routes to go there. Another medium claim, and this one I'm pretty sure I go against the grain on this. I don't know if I've ever asked your opinion on this, but we won't have to say names at all. But there's a lot of content out there about tinnitus is the anchor claim. You can have a 10% tinnitus rating and have a 100% VA disability rating. I'm not a fan of that. I know that's going to make people mad. Can you technically claim anxiety secondary to tinnitus? Sure. Can you claim mental health? I'm sorry. Can you claim migraine secondary to tinnitus? Sure. Can you claim vertigo secondary to tinnitus? You can claim whatever you want. Okay. But when you look at the aspects of tinnitus, and then the rates of which secondaries are connected to it, you'll find the opposite. I can't tell you how many
Right.
denials I have seen of vertigo secondary to tinnitus denied, migraine secondary to tinnitus denied. I see that all the time. Okay. I know where it comes from. It's because veterans hear tinnitus
Right.
secondary and they just file away and they're denied. And all of a sudden the VA sucks. When in reality, you look at the veterans evidence. And I've used this example before, but I'm going to say it again just to really drive it home. I had one veteran who was distraught, and that's an understatement. Super heated. They were mad. They were flustered. I could see it, like their skin was getting red. I was doing a meeting with them. They were denied migraine secondary to tinnitus. Now, I have my preconceived notions about that. I already know I don't like that claim. I don't know this veteran, but I already have that bias in me. So I ask him, hey, let me see the decision letter, right? You get denied and you need to see the decision letter. This veteran was a construction worker, and I'm not making this up. A construction worker who had documented head trauma way after military service. Documented head trauma, he was concussed, was in the hospital for documented head trauma. And the reason for denial is that migraine stemmed from head trauma. And I'm like, duh. What do you mean? Like, I don't have to
Right.
have, a PhD and whatever to understand that. That makes sense. And it's just, we're in the game of thumbnails and titles. Don't get me wrong. But there is a point where misinformation is misinformation. And tinnitus secondaries, I would argue, is one of those. And it's not that you can't submit those and you can't be service connected
Awarded.
afford those. Yeah. The question I always pose is, I had tinnitus. Jason, do you have tinnitus at all? I have a sweet
What?
hoodie, by the way, that
Yeah, you do.
someone could buy on Amazon.
Yeah, you
Anyways,
do.
the question I pose is, so Jason and I both had tinnitus. All of my friends who were in the infantry with me, every single one has tinnitus, without a doubt. The question is, does your tinnitus cause your X? Right? Do you have anxiety because of XYZ, or do you have anxiety because of your ringing in your ears? Do you have migraines because you have documented concussed head trauma, or do you have migraines because of your tinnitus? And that's people get really mad when I talk about that. It's going to get worse with hard secondaries. Don't worry.
Right.
But those are like the medium claims for easy and medium.
Yeah.
And, do you have any thoughts on tinnitus secondaries before you move to the multiple?
I think so yes, there's a whole list of, you can claim all these different things as secondary to tinnitus. And again, look, sure, maybe there is a veteran out there that could nail all of those, but for the most part, a lot of them are very hard to connect. Not impossible. Nothing's impossible, right? But I would say that the tinnitus secondary claims are probably a split, right? Some are in the medium category and some are in the hard category. As far as the medical kind of world is concerned, I would say. Now, what would have made your guy's story different is maybe if on a self-assessment in the military, on his exit evaluation, he checked the box that said headaches. And then where it said explain that, he said, yeah, I get migraines like, 3 times a week, and then cool, you had it before you had this horrible head trauma, you just never filed for it. So life, I just want to throw out there that life happens, and you're going to continue to push on and have a life, and you're going to get injured, and you're going to get hurt, and you're going to get in a car wreck, and all these different things are going to happen to you. But if you could reach back to your time in service and show any indication that something was going on with you then, by signs, symptoms, a medical visit, whatever it is, a self-assessment, whatever it is, it's going to put you in a much better position. And I know we're talking about secondaries, and this would kind of move it to a primary, but I also think, Clay, that sometimes people think that, well, let me just file it as this because I hear that it's easy to connect it this way. And it's like, well, but is it the right way? Because really, if you ordered your records, you might have complained about it when you were in. I don't know, So if you do not have your service treatment records, order them with the SF 180 form, SF standard form 180. So tinnitus claims secondary, I think it kind of falls into 2 different spots. I think that tinnitus with anxiety or depression probably falls in the medium category, depending on the severity of the tinnitus. My tinnitus is not severe. I am definitely on the lower scale. It's annoying, but it's not debilitating, if that makes sense. Quiet rooms pretty much suck, because it's like you get that funky sound. So I do white noise and that type of stuff just to sleep, and it's totally fine. I don't have, it's not ruining my life or anything. But I hear other people that it's like, oh, it's super, super severe. And I can see how that could be, that can cause some mental anguish, if you will. At the end of the day, Clay, I think that it's funny because you always talk about your evidence-based, right? Don't rely on the VA to uncover everything and draw all the lines and connect all the dots for you through a 10-minute CNP exam or 20-minute or an hour if it's a mental health. But whatever, don't rely on that. Provide your evidence and try to get that threshold up over the at least as likely as not aspect, right? Make it to where it's obvious that this is what's going on, right? Versus let me just give the bare minimums. This is why I'm really a fan of, look, file your intent to file, take your time to develop your claim, pull in all your evidence. The way you need to view this is you are filing this claim. It's a legal process, right? It's all evidence. You are having a set of paralegals look at this and decide whether or not you get this claim. If you disagree with their decision, you could push it to a judge and have the judge look at it. That is literally what's happening. Well, not really literally. I guess it's not. That's figuratively what's
It could
happening.
literally be what happens.
It could be, right? So the idea is that you need to act like you're going to court, because you kind of are. It's just that you can circumvent going to the judge if you can provide enough evidence up front with the mediator to actually rule in your decision, right? Or rule in your favor with the decision. Anyway, over to you, Clay. Let's talk about the hard ones.
Yeah, so the harder ones, I'm just going to rip the Band-Aid off here. Through the lens of a nexus letter, there are 3 things that kind of I need to check the box of, okay, I'm going with that. And AME is down below in the description if you meet these 3 criteria. Okay, it doesn't have to be all of them, but it's when the wheels start turning. And that's going to be sleep apnea, secondary to mental health. I'm going to use that as the basis here. People really get mad whenever I talk about this, but I don't care. You're wrong. I'm right. All right. That's rip the Band-Aid off type approach. So the reason why sleep apnea is in the hard category, and I would consider a nexus, again, there's 3 things. One is, what's my rating? If I'm 86% and I get sleep apnea connected, that would be 90, 91%. I'm still at 90. Okay. So obviously I'm not going to spend $2,000 or $1,500 or whatever it is on a nexus letter because there's no outcome change. It's worthless. Okay. That's
Right.
1. 2, have I been denied? Okay. Have I been denied? I am a fan of using nexus letters for denials because that's like that's the evidence for the supplemental appeal that gives the veteran power. But if you have the means, submitting a nexus letter with the initial claim is totally okay. And then 3rd, for sleep apnea specifically, there is a time aspect here because am I willing to pay a nexus? Am I willing to get a nexus letter for a claim that's 50%, which is a big ticket item? That's going to move a good 90, it's like an 89 or a 90. That's the difference between 90 and 100%. All of a sudden, that changes everything because the benefits at 100 are so far above 90, and certainly the lower
It's
rate.
unbelievable.
It's
Yeah.
insane. Not just money, take money away. Just the benefits for being P&T are incomparable. Okay, so that's tipping the scale for me. The reason why I use sleep apnea secondary to mental health is because there's evidence that I'm going to call competing evidence. And everyone doesn't like to talk about this, and I don't know why. It's along the same lines of the tinnitus conversation we had, Jason, where the veteran had competing evidence. He wanted migraines secondary to tinnitus. He had documented head trauma that put him in the hospital, a multiple night visit for concussion. That's competing evidence. The competing evidence for sleep apnea is everywhere. There's so much, okay? The most common is actually going to be obesity. So if you are in your 40s, you have PTSD, you want to submit sleep apnea secondary to mental health because that's what YouTube told you to do. So you do it and you're denied and you're also 350 pounds. I can tell you right now, without even looking at your decision letter, you were denied because you're fat. And I'm saying it as direct like that for a reason so everyone can understand what I'm saying. And so, well, what does that mean for evidence? Okay. When you are gathering evidence for claims that are hard, you have to look at both tracks. What is the evidence that's in my favor? What's the evidence that's not in my favor? So if I am overweight, okay, before the VA concedes on this denial, is there a way I can use this evidence not in my favor and rope that back in so it is in my favor? Maybe your PTSD has caused you to have a lack, your testosterone levels are down. You have a lack of will to exercise. Maybe you have a back condition, some knee conditions that prevent or debilitate you from working out. Maybe you have an eating disorder. There's a billion things happening. Maybe your obesity can be service connected. And what I mean by that is an intermediate step. I don't want to go too far into intermediate steps right now. But the point is, there's evidence for, there's evidence against, and we can't ignore evidence against. In fact, if you do ignore evidence against, the VA is just going to cling to that as like an easy denial, and it happens all the time. Sleep apnea, secondary mental health, I put in the hard category because of just like the lens, for the lower back and radiculopathy, you can see it via MRI, X-ray, opinions, notes, whatever. For sleep apnea, secondary to mental health, you can have 10 exams. 5 of them will say at least as likely as not. 5 of them will say less likely as not. Because the evidence is opinionated. The evidence is correlated at best. At best, it's correlated. There's no causative link. I already know someone's going to say, well, I looked at PubMed to see there is a causative link. Yeah, well, there's 100 other studies that say the opposite. Again, competing evidence matters. And so that's definitely one. And the last thing I'll say on sleep apnea, secondary mental health, Jason, and then I'm going to turn it to you for another hard secondary, if you will. The more correlating factors you have, because you're not going to prove causation, you're not going to see more likely than not on sleep apnea secondary. Not going to happen. At a minimum, you're going to get, or at most, you're going to get at least as likely. The reason for that is because it's looking at correlating factors, and there are a few, okay? Do you have conditions that correlate to sleep apnea? Anxiety is a huge one, okay? PTSD is a huge one. So while you're sleeping, you might be physically sleeping, but inside your body, you're tight, okay? You might have high blood pressure, whatever that looks like. There's a few other things going on in there. That's going to obstruct your airway, obstructing, sleep apnea. So conditions that correlate, maybe you're on a medication like gabapentin, that's correlated to sleep apnea. Maybe you are overweight. You're going to have to account for that. You can't ignore being fat. Can't do it. You have to account for that evidence because that's competing evidence. Maybe you were exposed for a long period of time inhaling bad pollution, like burn pit. There's a medical term for bad pollution. I forgot what it is. I'm just going to say bad pollution, right? But you're constantly breathing this in. All 4 of those, you're going to be service connected. If you have one, we're kind of back on the 5-5 now. 5 say yes, 5 say no. And so there's so many things happening with sleep apnea. That is really what's going to tip the scale of, what? Maybe I am going to get a nexus letter for this one. And this matters because right now the planning factor for final proposal date is August of this year. So if you were ever considering sleep apnea secondary, my sincere opinion is use AME, go get a nexus letter, because if you don't, and this becomes effective, that option is going to be out the window because there's no way you're paying for a secondary at 0%. Like it's not going to happen.
Right.
That's my spiel on sleep apnea. I hope I rustled some feathers out there. If you don't like it, again, I'm right, you're wrong, right? So.
Right. Nice. And for those that don't know, AME is American Medical Experts. They're board certified doctors, right? This is just a team of doctors that understand the legalese of the VA claims process. So they interweave all the legalese stuff in there for you, so you're not having to explain what you're trying to get done for the VA. If your doctor will do it, great. It probably won't cost you anything, or it'll cost you very little, but you're going to have to bring your doctor up to speed with what's happening. Again, if your doctor can't, won't, doesn't, AME is a definite solution. All right, so you talked about sleep apnea secondary to mental health. Now, another way is sleep apnea to tinnitus. Is also another secondary that's a hard hill to climb. And again, you would want some hard medical evidence in your favor for that. Same thing with, maybe something like chronic fatigue syndrome for tinnitus as a secondary, right?
Mhm.
So there's, you really have to prove it for you. It's look, the evidence that's out there could be some people do, some don't. Maybe 2 out of 10 do, but the other ones don't. So you really need to hammer home. And the points that you were making, Clay, were outstanding. And it's really important for people to understand that there's evidence being presented against you in your claim.
Yes.
You are bringing in your evidence. Don't shortchange it. I would say the biggest problem that I see with veterans filing claims by themselves, or even through a VSO in some cases, is the lack of going extra to bring evidence in to really support your claim. And I think that people hurt themselves in two ways. One, they don't supply enough, so then it's like, oh, well, the evidence isn't quite there, so we're going to rule against you. Or it's there, but maybe you miss an opportunity for the 5-year rule to kick in because you didn't supply the last 8 years of evidence that you've had that condition and it stayed the same. Instead, you've just supplied the most recent whatever, and that's it. Well, now the VA only has what you gave them. So now you might have a future exam potentially on whatever it is. Another thing that I want folks to understand, Clay, is although there are different levels of difficulty in
Mhm.
filing for secondaries, don't let that deter you. If you believe that your condition is caused by X, have that conversation with your doctor and have them supply you the medical evidence that you need. In addition, you need to decide whether or not a nexus letter is going, or not a nexus letter, a DBQ, a disability questionnaire would help you. If you're saying you get migraine headaches, for example, migraine headaches, you might want to get a DBQ, a disability questionnaire, completed that shows the severity of your condition as it relates to the rating schedule so you can make sure that you're getting the appropriate rating. Are you supposed to be a 10, a 30, a 50? Have that conversation with your doctor so they can make sure that they're putting the correct information into that DBQ. Now, if it's a muscular skeletal issue, where it's how far can you bend before you start feeling any pain, maybe you don't need to have a DBQ for that because they're going to do that in the actual CMP exam. And you just need to be aware of, okay, well, it actually it just hurts now. I don't need to move for it to hurt. It already hurts. Right. You just really need to be in tune with yourself as you're going through that. I just wanted to add those pieces in there, Clay. There wasn't, your example for hard made a lot of sense. Any tips, tools, anything that people can think about as they're trying to assess what they have going on?
Yeah. So really quick, because I mentioned just understanding your body head to toe. I genuinely think about your head. Mental health, migraines, TBI. What's next? Eye conditions. Do you have any eye conditions? Even a dry eye, which would be 0% anyways. Regardless, we're going to submit the claim. Tinnitus, hearing loss, Meniere's, vertigo. Think about your mouth, TMJ, bruxism, other dental conditions, neck pain. Think about your arms. I'm going to go through head to toe. Like when I say head to toe, here's what I mean. Your arms, your nerve damage stemming from your neck. What about your shoulders, your elbows, your forearms, your wrists, your fingers, okay? Biceps, triceps. Then moving down to your chest. What about chest pain, heart conditions, hypertension? I skipped the nose. We'll go back up to the nose, right? Sinusitis, rhinitis, sleep apnea, asthma. And I'm just throwing some of the most common conditions. There are a billion more just from here, okay?
Right.
And then going to the spine, the lower spine, think about other back conditions, arthritis throughout the whole body, some bladder conditions, IBS, GERD, whatever that looks like for you, hernias, ulcers, prostate, or let's just say, your feel-good organisms, whatever that looks like, whether it's ED or FSAD on the female side of the house. Think about your hips, your thighs, your knees, the nerves in your legs, your shin splints, ankles, and feet. And whenever you have that framework from head to toe, you can really begin to say, you know what? I don't have a diagnosis for migraines, but I know I get migraines. Okay, what's the very next step is speak with your provider. Although we mentioned easy, medium, and hard secondary claims, if you don't have a diagnosis, it's not easy, medium, or hard. It's a no. No
Right.
diagnosis, no claim.
Yeah.
Period. There's no getting around that. Okay. And so that would be step one. Hey, I think I have this. Jason he mentioned self-diagnosis. That's not a thing. That does not exist. Okay. And so when it comes to self-diagnosing, that's really a self-assessment and just say, hey, I'm going to go talk to my healthcare provider. Okay. Do I have migraines? And depending on what that severity is, the good thing is all evidence is evidence. So speaking with your healthcare provider, being assigned a treatment plan, whether you're on sumatriptan, there are other treatments for migraines. Like there's this neuro pulse thing called gammaCore, which like does something for your migraines. There's just a billion other options for treatment, and all of that is evidence. All of that's going to be in favor of any VA claim that you submit. And so I can't stress enough to, I think you said, Jason, one time, know you. Like what is going on with you, which is good. The next step is communicate that to private or VA, whatever that looks like for you. That's really all I have to kind of wrap this up, Jason.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the head to toe, inside and out approach, that kind of self-assessment. Take some time. It's really an important thing to do. Also, if you have a spouse or a loved one who's around you a lot,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, pick their brain too. They'll tell you if you can hear or not. They'll tell you, you know what I mean? So take advantage of that. And make sure that you're just annotating it all down, and then you start looking for anything that'll reach back to your time in service. Again, if you don't have your service records, you can order them. If you don't have your DD-214, if you don't have your treatment records, you can order that all with the SF-180. And as a side note, if you have a loved one who had passed away, grandfather, grandmother, whatever it is, father, brother, whatever it is, as the next of kin, you can order their records with that same form. And it's just nice to have, that as a keepsake. So just wanted to throw that out there. With that, thanks so much for watching. We appreciate you very much. Have a great one. And remember, if we don't take care of each other, nobody's going to take care of Clay.
Nice.
I can't even say it.
No, that's not being edited. That's on the final.